Hello, my name is Alex Ambris, and I am for horse slaughter. I will talk about the cultural influence and how that keeps this alive, and some of the cultured countries such as Switzerland, Belgium, Japan, Germany, Indonesia, Poland, and China are some that regularly consume horse meat. It's so normal that it's often a first go-to choice when purchasing meats at markets. It's considered a daily food there because there's a lot of unwanted horses. It could also be a delicacy to others where it's hard to buy or it's even banned. The United States had banned it in 2007, but some states may allow it. Cultural influence keeps consuming horse meat a normal thing, and it may even grab the attention of others wanting to try horse meat. Usually food enthusiasts would be willing to travel, country lines to try the horse meat if it's banned in their area. But as humans, we eat what's around us, and these countries might only have horses at their disposal. But China comes in first place with over 200,000 tons of horse meat per year. But yes, the cultural lifestyle of these countries will ultimately keep horse slaughter alive. But it usually becomes a tradition, if anything, and that's where the recipes and how they handle horse slaughter comes into play. And recipes, I think, is the biggest one because that's where families come together and they learn off of each other, and these recipes will be passed down to them, and then their kids, and then their kids, and then so on. So I feel like that's why the cultural influence plays a big role. I'll be going on to the next slide. And that one is about the unwanted horses. But the University of Maine makes the estimate that it takes $3,876 to take care of a horse. And it's not an issue about the cost, but rather the labor that it takes. Some people don't have the patience to take care of a horse, and they just kind of give up, and they just can't get rid of the horse, and that's where the neglection comes into play. But people overbreed on their farms, and they can't get rid of the horses that they intend to sell. And many factors are taken into consideration when owning a horse, such as feed supply, vet expenses, housing for the horse, the truck and a trailer, equipment to ride, and tools to properly groom the horse. So it could take about $800 a month to maintain a horse. Some horses might be too wild that you might not be able to tame them. So how I see it is an untrainable horse is an unwanted horse. And that's where I want to talk about the competing aspect. And if your horse isn't good, then you lose money. So if you're not winning, you're losing. And you lose money also. And that's where people might not have interest in a losing horse and have to get rid of it. And that's where the kill buyers come into play. And they would gladly buy the horse that you obviously don't want, but you'd have a guilty mind about, that's going to go to a slaughterhouse for 60 cents a pound. But there's horse coalitions that aim to do things more humanely. And if you have one in your area, I feel like that's the best option because they could come in. It says they'll come and get your horse, but I'm not too sure if they'll charge a fee. But they aim to get the unwanted horses, rather than someone that just wants to make profit off of a horse by taking it to a slaughterhouse. But that's the unwanted aspect of horses. There's a lot that goes into unwanted horses, but I think these are the main points, I'd say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paola Gomez, and my part of the presentation goes over the acceptable methods of euthanasia for horses. There are three methods of euthanasia that I found. There is chemical euthanasia, a gunshot, and using a penetrating captive bolt. Chemical euthanasia is through a lethal injection of pentobarbital, and it is inserted through the vein of the horse. Before the horse is given the injection, a veterinarian needs to give the horse a sedative to calm the horse down. Barbiturate overdoses lead to fast unconsciousness, cessation of breathing, and cardiac arrest. This method is the most advanced drug of euthanasia and preferred by veterinarians and even horse owners. Even though it is the most expensive out of the other two methods, it is recommended. The second method is a gunshot, and it causes instantaneous death, meaning that they die instantly. Since the brain of the horse is high in the head, the firearm needs to be aimed in the middle of the horse's forehead. So in the picture here, you could see a horse with lines intersected. So a way you can see it would be to imagine two lines each from the corner of one eye to the end of the opposite ear. It should be a little higher than what you would normally aim for a cattle. It is recommended that the muzzle of the firearm should be slightly tilted so that the shot is directed towards the cerebral cortex of the brainstem. And this is responsible for many higher order brain functions, like sensation, perception, memory, and voluntary physical action. The good thing about using a gunshot is that it's less expensive than a lethal injection, and you don't need to be close to the horse in order to perform the procedure. The last method that can be used is a penetrating captive bolt. This method is a little safer than using a gunshot because there's no bullet, meaning that you can't hurt other animals or human beings in case if you miss. When using the captive bolt, you do need to hold it against the surface of the horse's head. There are two types of captive bolts. There is penetrating and non-penetrating. First, penetrating captive bolt is a concussion and trauma to the brain. This causes immediate unconsciousness and destruction to the brain tissue. It is highly recommended to ensure that the horse is dead. So some ways that you can make sure that the horse is unconscious is that the horse will collapse, it won't try to lift itself, there will be no movement, the breathing will stop, and the eyelids will remain open. The next type is a non-penetrating captive bolt, and this type only stunts the animal, which is not recommended because there's always a chance that the animal can still live. So in this case, when wanting to euthanize a horse, using a penetrating captive bolt is the best way to do it. After the procedure, it is best to clean the captive bolt, and when doing the procedure, it would be best if there was someone that has experience and knows what they are doing. And with this being said, these are the 3 acceptable methods for euthanizing a horse.
Hello, my name is Jace Treveo, and I'll be talking about the slide of the benefits of horse slaughter. So to start off with, horse slaughter can create many new jobs as well as generate a large amount of income. And this is because slaughterhouses can employ a lot of people, and they're not necessarily fully automated like other factory jobs would be. They still need the people in there to be able to make sure the horses are going through the right conditions and making sure that everything is just running well. On top of that, it could just make a new generation of butchers and teach people how to cut up different kinds of meats that are for horses, because slaughtering an animal is different depending on which animal it is. So it would be pretty educational for people who are already in the butchering profession, and it may make people become more butchers, so that would generate even more jobs. And there's just a lot that goes on inside factories that require a lot of hands-on, a lot of people working there. And it would also make them buy more equipment, which will generate more jobs of making those equipment. So I think that it would just be a pretty good benefit all the way around. And The next benefit of horse slaughter would be it solves the unwanted horse population problem by adding income instead of losing it, taking care of the horses. So in the previous slides, we talked about how expensive it would be just for caring for one horse. So instead of losing that money, taking care of it and using up the space that it takes to take care of a horse, then giving it to a slaughterhouse would instead add income because they can sell the meat and the animal parts. So it would make it more cost effective. And on top of being cost effective, it would really just add a lot more to the economy because taking care of these horses is just a lot of income from people that could be using their income otherwise. And although it may take away from other industries such as like the feed industry and like the veterinarians that take care of the unwanted horses, it would still be adding a lot because a lot of the time unwanted horses are just kind of taking up a lot of room and there's just not enough land for them anymore where people aren't inhabiting it. So unwanted horses just run around fields and they could get injured on their own if nobody's keeping a watch over them, and they would just be dying slowly. So I feel like that's even worse than just being able to send them to a slaughterhouse, because instead of having them suffer, it would just get it over quickly. And for the third point, it gives more purpose to mercy killing older or injured horses, because when you just euthanize a horse, then there's not much that you can do with it because you kind of just bury it. But if you were to give it to a slaughterhouse instead, then the horse would have been euthanized anyway. But this way, their parts and their meat can be used for humans, and many different things can be done with that. And the butchers and slaughterhouses would still humanely slaughter them by, as you learned in the previous slide, just in those 3 different ways, but probably not the chemical way. And it would take the burden away from the owners, because no owner that's owned a horse for like 25 years really looks forward to the day that they have to put their horse down. So being able to give it away to a slaughterhouse or a butcher would take off that pressure from the owners. And finally, with new technologies such as video and live streaming, this would make sure that slaughterhouses are following humane protocols, and it would be much easier and quicker to shut down those not following the rules. So a big proponent to slaughterhouses is that they're always abusing the animals and not treating them correctly. But all of that happened before live streaming and videos were just so big. So now that it is so big and internet culture has kind of exploded, then it would be much easier to catch right at the source of where the inhumane slaughtering is happening and being able to shut it down as quickly as they could. And it would make these slaughterhouses much more cautious because they know that they're being recorded all the time. Especially if it's a live stream, then people would be able to just watch it all the time and they'd never know if someone's watching or not. So it would definitely keep them on their toes. And I think that all of these things is why horse slaughter should be legal and should be done in the United States. And on top of that, this is our works cited page for the against section. And these are all the links that we used. And thank you for listening.